Hey everybody, this is Christian Buckley. I am a Microsoft MVP, so an Office Apps and Services MVP. I'm based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Got a raging snowstorm that's happening right now outside. So I've been out shoveling snow this morning. Always great to kick off a webinar with doing some manual labor out in the snow is going sideways with the wind, which is really nice. But anyway, I'm going to go through one of my favorite topics, the topic that I covered in Copenhagen. I've made a couple edits to the presentation since November of 2018, but I'll try to get through this very, very quickly. And the slides are all out there and available already out on slideshare.net. If you go and look for that and search on my name, you'll find the presentation. You can also find it out on my LinkedIn profile, and of course, you can find it through the ESPC website. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so navigating the inner and outer loops and talking about Office 365 communications and what that means. So there's a lot, I think, that can be unpacked within this topic. There's certainly some sideways discussions that we can have around each one of these items. Communication can be incredibly complex, and we've all had these experiences where we think that we're saying one thing and people are interpreting it differently than our meaning. Think of it in the team dynamics, not Teams the product, but your actual physical team, your work team, your workmates. The way that you communicate, how you do things is as important as the fact that you're doing them. Now, maybe you're familiar with this or a version of this. This is the company Insights there on the left that's gone and used some of the personality profile capabilities. They do some pretty detailed testing of individuals, but it's done at a team level. So these little colored bricks are something, when I went to work for Microsoft back in 2006, beginning of 2006, I believe this is still pretty widespread inside the company because it's a heavily adopted, recognized tool and practice inside of Microsoft to go and do this Insights training. But they've gone in and taken this the psychological personality testing and at the team level, and they've Insights has kind of packaged this up in a way where they've color coded this. So if you think of so there on the left side, the red brick, that represents the action-oriented, the project managers, the let's go, let's do something. And then in the Microsoft world, it's generally recognized that like Steve Ballmer was very much a red-driven, like go, take action. Green is the support, is the community person, is the like, hey man, you look sad today, you need a hug, like that kind of person. The more of the empathy. Yellow is the collaborative, the creative, the inclusive. Let's get everybody together. Let's talk about this. What do you think about it? What's your opinion? And so it's the people that are generally the ones that are bringing others together and sharing ideas. And then blue is something which is actually the most dominant color inside of Microsoft, or it was a few years back. Which is the data analysis. Let's pull in the research on this. Let's take a look at this, run the numbers. Let's look at the dashboards, that side of that. And Microsoft is internally, again, it was when I was there more than a decade ago, but predominantly blue-red. And we're all a mixture of these different things. There's nobody that is one solid color. We have different styles. There's different nuances to our personalities, but we generally lead with one or two. But anyway, we are a mix of these things. You think about these Myers-Briggs personality types, probably a little more familiar with the different things. And this is just a sampling of those, but gives a great example of leading with one, but you're a mixture of those others. And these are not, it's not like palm reading. It's not going to tell you exactly your future and your personality from doing these tests. But what's really amazing about going through this exercise, especially as a team, is better understanding your own work style, your own preferences for how you communicate, and then The second part is starting to recognize the styles, the preferences, the personality, the leading indicators of your peers, your manager, your customers, inside and outside of your company. It's not something that you're just going to be able to go to a half-day workshop and start to be able to identify these things. It takes time. It takes training. I went through a program that was called Pathwise Leadership originally out of the Seattle area. It's spreading all over. It's now part of the curriculum inside of Microsoft as well. I went through a year-long cohort, graduated from that program, and I was just scratching the surface of starting to be able to, as I interact with people, recognize their styles. So understand your own personality, understand and recognize patterns of behavior in others. But where this really becomes valuable, and the goal of like the insights training, is to then understand, well, how does my style best interact with your style? When you get to that point and can know that, okay, there's a person that and I had this experience. I had a very abrasive relationship with a director. And once I understood her style, it's almost like I had a cheat sheet. I was able to kind of anticipate how she would respond to different things and then be ready with a counter, again, like a cheat sheet. It was almost like, magic, being able to go and say, I know that she's going to respond this way, but I'm going to have this data to back it up. And then this will help. I'll have this other person there to help convince her that this is how we need to move forward. And it worked. And it was great to be able to go and see that. Again, it takes time, it takes effort to go and do that. We have these different ways that we look at the world. We often forget about that when we then talk about technology. And that's really the point of why am I talking about group dynamics? You think about that, most communication and collaboration, it's not about the technology. And I always say this, I'll repeat myself a number of times during this session, but that, you can have outdated ancient technology, yet you can have teams that communicate, collaborate well with that old technology and still be very successful. What you don't find is all the latest, greatest, fantastic technology in a team that doesn't communicate and collaborate well and then find success. Doesn't happen. I've got some other slides and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So finding that right cultural fit is essential for your technology, the processes, the business activities themselves, and the needs and the expectations of the people that are within that system. So understanding that corporate culture, it is essential to everything else you're trying to do with the business and the technology. That's where you need to start. Don't go read a magazine article or get some marketing material from Microsoft and excited about the latest, greatest technology and ignore what's actually happening with the people who might or might not use this technology. And then also have a strong, and I think this is equally important, a separate point to make about your change management model. So the process in which you introduce these things. So there's recognizing what your team culture is, and then there's having a process in place that helps evolve the technology, your processes, based on what you understand about your organization. Again, I'll come back to all those things, but here's the key point: is that culture is that keystone that holds it all together. You remove the keystone, the arch collapses. And so you have to understand that culture. And there are, inexplicable failures of technology deployments that if you go and you look at what actually happened, it's a failure to adapt that cool, new, high-performing technology against what the expectations were of the culture. So collaboration, part of the problem, what makes this a moving target is that it's incredibly complex. And Microsoft has shared these. You've probably seen some of these out there, these slides. We've got all these clients that are saying, hey, we've got good enough. We've got these legacy platforms. We've got all these other devices that are out there, all of these third-party solutions, these fragmented endpoint solutions that are out there. It's incredibly easy if you as an IT go and say, here is the one way in which we will work going forward for the company. And you have no choice in that. What happens? And everybody just kind of quietly shuffles back to their cubicles, and then they log in and use their personal card, and they subscribe to some service or tool, or they go back to working the way that they were before you were foolish enough to go and announce that there was one solution to solve all solutions, all problems. And so the reality is that it's incredibly complex what the needs are. I mean, it used to be, that IT would find out that somebody's using an unauthorized application or system, and they would just go and lock that down or kind of thrash against, the individual or the team that allowed that to happen. When what should happen is a conversation to understand, what do we have today that's not meeting your needs? What are the additional capabilities that you have that are so important to you being productive, or to your work style, or the needs of the business unit or team? Having conversations around that and understanding, because it may be an education issue. Well, are you aware that we actually have those features and they're superior, and here's how they work, and educate them on what's there? Or you have a better understanding of what's not there and what you in IT need to be doing. So we've got all these products, increasingly complex demands, and a tough competitive environment, a lot of things happening. But again, the fact that, from a SharePoint perspective, is that the use of team sites versus communication sites and now hub sites is it's amazing progress forward in SharePoint. Man, I tell you, how much time I spent managing SharePoint environments, consolidating every time there was an org change, and having to go and create new sites or expand or retract and clean up and move documents and move data and clean up permissions and all of that, because the system was inflexible. And we found people that said, yeah, it's just easier if I just go, and we've got this Dropbox that we use. And, and so you have those kinds of responses when the system and the process around that system are inflexible, and users are like water running downhill. They will go around the rock that you place in front of them, and they'll keep on flowing because they need to get their work done. At the end of the year, they will be judged on, their performance will be measured based on what they've accomplished, not whether they've complied with IT's decree that you must use these 3 technologies in the course of your work. They're going to go get their work done. But SharePoint's being set up now as the content service across Office 365. What's in Microsoft Teams where documents are being held? It's SharePoint. What's behind OneDrive for Business? It's SharePoint. What's happening when I upload a file into a group chat within Yammer? Very soon, and going forward, it'll all be SharePoint behind the scenes. And so we had talked a couple years back, and there was some fear that the brand of SharePoint was going away to be displaced by SharePoint as a service and this non-brand infrastructural product. That didn't happen as far as the brand going away, and it's still out there and bigger than, better than ever. But it is also becoming part of the pipes below Office 365. Microsoft has greatly improved that story, not just the story, the reality of bridging the gap between the various workloads so that it's a consistent experience and common technologies that are across them. But does SharePoint fit every single collaboration scenario? No, of course not. But you understand how Microsoft envisions the future. You've probably seen the video that's out there. If you go and do a search for Microsoft, the future of business meetings, you'll find a couple different live on stage. I think they did it at Build again. It was at Inspire, which is the partner conference. Last couple years, they showed a variant of this video where you really start to see like the power of Teams. And of course, they've got like the Surface, the giant wall Surface. You need a different name for it other than calling it Surface. You know, the giant one, the kind of pen board / interactive screen for meeting rooms. Anyway, they had this interactive, and some other devices as well, this meeting, and kind of showed that vision for the future. And Microsoft, I think they still do this, but they create these visions like the modern workplace or the modern household, kind of their vision for the future. I remember in 2006, 2007, when they had a new version of that, and they were showing that as an employee looking at this, we used to joke, like the person wakes up in the morning and there's like this blank piece of glass that's the size of a smartphone. And the guy wakes up, sits up in bed and touches the glass, and suddenly it is a smartphone, and he starts working. And as he's walking to the bathroom, he swipes the glass, and the picture, the image that he's watching, the presentation, the interaction, jumps to the wall of his bedroom and then into the mirror in the bathroom while he's shaving and brushing his teeth. And as he's walking out of the house and locks his front door, he gets into his car, and the same video, he flicks it and over, and it's showing inside the car, and kind of all this stuff. And my first response to all of that is, in the future, buy a lot of stock in Windex, because there's a lot of glass. People are touching surfaces, and you're going to need to wipe all that down and disinfect it. I'm just thinking, one sick kid in the household, and like, sorry, I couldn't join that webinar, but my kid's sick and he touched my phone. But the jokes aside, that in the live demo, again, I think it was at Build. I'll have to go grab a link and put it in this. That's what I'm missing here. But they talk about what happens leading up to, during, and following a meeting. And it's a combination of things. A lot of video for people that are there in person. You think you could even have like an augmented reality situation, kind of like the Jedi Temple, where you might have people that appear through this augmented reality, in the room with you while you're having a conversation. And we're not quite there yet. However, I'm constantly having meetings with people on different continents, and through web meetings, and then we're interacting, we're doing things in real time. But being able to see, like, before you go to that meeting, getting reminders, getting the system with the artificial intelligence is pushing you information about, hey, here's the project that you'll be discussing. You had these 3 tasks out of the last meeting that you've followed up on 2, but not on the 3rd. So close this out before you go into this meeting. Once you're in there, it captures the recording. And I love this feature in Teams now, of recording that, automatically uploading, saving that in Teams via stream, and then doing the transcription and translation there, instantly have that available, making that content searchable. And then again, the AI pulling out of that conversation, the discussion, and the demo, the live demo is incredible, because it's, even as people are interrupting each other, talking over each other, it's still able to recognize who the various people are, what they're saying, and then the action items that came out of that meeting. And then following that, the system can again automatically share the notes, any minutes, and any assignments, any tasks, next steps, and do that in an automated way. Just incredible amount of things that are happening. There are, and I mentioned that old video back in 2006, 2007, because some of what I just described, and that you can see live in this demo from Build, they were shown in that video 15 years ago. It's how's that right? 12 years ago, 13 years ago. Oh, getting too old, too many gray hairs. But it's just incredible, the level of automation of what's happening. That's the future there. Part of the problem, let's get back into SharePoint and Office 365 and communication. And we all know this. I think inherently we understand that having too many options actually decreases our productivity. If you question this logic, then think about your favorite restaurants. And there's a couple restaurants which, honestly, I don't know how they survive, where they've got like 20 pages in their menus, versus the simplicity of, there's a reason why the most dollars that are transferred in restaurants are those that have very simple menus. I look at fast food restaurants, where they start to go downhill is where their menus get overly complex. Think of In-N-Out Burger. You've never been to an In-N-Out Burger. There's like 4 things that you can order. That's it. A burger, a cheeseburger, throw some additional meat on there or not, onions or no onions, a milkshake or soda, and fries. That's it. I mean, there's a couple other things, but that's it. And they're just enormously successful and growing. But we have that same issue with are collaboration and communication tools. So there's this question that's always asked. Well, Microsoft came out with Teams, and I think instantly, while people may have been excited by the technology 3 years ago, instantly people said, well, which tool do I use when? Because they recognized, hey, there's some overlap with Yammer. There's overlap with Outlook, with SharePoint, with everything else that I'm using out there. But here's the problem. This is the wrong question to ask. You've seen other variants of this. Look, there's all these tools that are out there. When we're looking at the problem the wrong way, when we're looking at this through the lens of the technology, and we look at the stack, well, here's problems with this, and this is only a couple years old. Is that doesn't exist anymore? Not really. It's going away. If you're still holding on to it, if you get the server versions of that, so that's there. So broadcast is gone. It's now all being rolled in Teams. But we also we're not recommending people use these other platforms. That's part of a reality, I know. But it also groups the way that we look at it. Yeah, it can still do these things. It has the email messaging and calendaring, but when it was launched, it was more of a internal competition with Yammer than it was kind of an infrastructural aspect. But the point is, the names and the brands, the technologies change, and they're irrelevant. I'm going to come back to this point again. And when you're taking a business focus, you're first talking about who is my team, what is our corporate culture, what is the scope of what we're trying to accomplish, the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish, and approaching it, and then looking at the technology. I would say last. And I'll come back to that. But Microsoft came out with this messaging around the inner and outer loops. And you've probably seen and heard a version of this. I've got a variant of that here. I'll run through this very quickly. But the idea of where to start a conversation and how the products align. Again, Microsoft is not dictating like, this is the way that you must use this. Here's examples. The right way to use each of these technologies is whatever works for your organization. Just to share a quick story is at the MVP Summit last year, we get together annually on Microsoft campus as MVPs, and we get access to the engineering and the marketing teams and get to share our feedback and see a little bit into the future of what's coming out and to get kind of warmed up and ready for some of the announcements that are coming out publicly later in the year. And in the Microsoft Teams engineering presentation, they announced how they were increasing the number of people that you could let into a Microsoft team to 5,000, and had about 200 people in the room, and overwhelmingly people stood up like boo and arguing and saying and upset. And it's, look, I understand that there are scenarios there, but the idea that I would invite 5,000 people into my team in Microsoft Teams kind of defeats the purpose of that inner loop conversation, which is where Teams best aligns. But what Microsoft was doing, they weren't going in there and saying, add everybody in your company into a team, although that may be the right thing to do in some cases. To give everyone the opportunity, to give them visibility and the ability to interact. Doesn't mean that they won't be in there, but are there better ways to do that? Sure, there are other scenarios. Let me talk about some of these though. What does this mean? Inner loop first, and why Teams is the best fit for this. So I think of this as like an event team. They're putting together an event. It's something that's happening. Like I'm one of the organizers for SharePoint Saturday in Utah. It's happening in 3 days. It's happening on February 9th. And this is our 8th annual event, which is great because it's been relatively easy to organize because it's our 8th time doing it with pretty much all the same people in the organizing squad. So, but when we have conversations that are leading up to this event where we're capturing it all, where the organized, there might be, we're going to have 250, 300 people at this event. However, there's the 8 to 10 of us that are talking once, twice a week about, planning for the event. That's where we need to have this inner loop, where it's a tight-knit team that needs to collaborate on this end product. Another example is technical support, trying to resolve a customer ticket. I worked in operations. My last couple of years at Microsoft, I was in ad operations. And so I had an engineering and project management team and partnered with the tier two engineers, operation engineers, the tier one being the front line, the people answering the phone calls, and tier two being the primary support. Tier three is the product team. So when something was broken on the front end, the tier one look in the knowledge base, don't have an answer, go to tier two, it's more of a technical issue. If they can't resolve it, they would go and work with the product team to essentially create a feature to answer that customer's need. Well, do I need to add, if there's 5,000 support engineers, do every one of them need to be on and have visibility into this ticket I'm trying to solve for my client? No. As the engineer, I might involve 4 or 5 people, grab somebody to the product team for visibility, but just have this rapid conversation. For operations, for support people, one of your primary metrics is the mean time to resolution. How long does it take for you to close that ticket and to solve the problem? Happy customer, all important, but to close that ticket as quickly as possible, because that determines my bonus, that or how much I get a raise for the next annual review. And so I want to have those people that I need to collaborate with to get that job done. A project manager who has a virtual team to collaborate on a specific initiative, wants to form that. All of these are inner loop conversations. Now, on the outer loop, Yammer is an excellent solution for that. When you think of outer loop, like an ideation, the executive, the CEO wants to say, you know what, we want to go and solve this customer problem. We're not sure what it is. It's an area that's new. What products or services should we take from what we do today? What do we need to do that's new? I want to get this feedback from anyone within the company. That's like an ideation. You don't know where those best ideas are going to come from. You're looking for expertise outside of your working team. Or, and this is a big pet peeve of mine, when you work for a company and you have a title in that current company, you have a decade of experience outside of the company, and yet no one will recognize that you are an expert in something that is not your area of focus today. It sounds crazy, yet it's very common. Not like it's coming from personal experience or anything. But by leveraging this outer loop, you're tapping into that. The phrase is collective unconscious of your employees, of your partners, whoever's in your system. That you're tapping into their life experiences, and you may find that somebody had exactly relevant experience in a past job. You would never know that by just looking at the resources that you have, their company profile about what their job is today. And so this is that outer loop, going outside of what you know. So it could be an open discussion. I love using Yammer as a knowledge repository, as a way, and use an example. I was with the company, we got acquired. I'm sitting in an all hands meeting. We were at 5 different locations, I believe. And so had hundreds of employees at 5 different locations for most of the day, all on these internal only broadcasts. The CEO kicked things off. And I realized people are asking questions. There's emails being passed around. And I said, well, Yammer's perfect for this. So I go in right there on the fly, sitting there in this meeting live. I'm in Washington, D.C. Flew in from the Seattle area. I go and I find that, here the company had a Yammer environment. And yet the last time anyone was in that Yammer environment was almost a year previous. And so I went in immediately. I created a group for this sales kickoff meeting and pushed the word out, and instantly people were asking questions. And as the speaker was going, we started surfacing questions that are being asked from around the world to the speaker that was there live. And so it was wonderful that way. And other people were answering questions before they even got, interrupted the speaker to ask these things. What was brilliant about this was months later, 4 or 5 months later, there was another company acquisition, a smaller company, but we did another all hands meeting. And I got into the meeting off of the customer call a few minutes late and realized that people had already gone into that same Yammer group and we're pointing people to discussions that happened months earlier. And it got done while I was still with the company. A third time that we had another small acquisition had the same activity. And people, again, were pointing back to these old threads where questions were answered and data was shared. So it became this knowledge resource that was excellent. Now, underneath all of that, you have SharePoint, OneDrive, and Outlook, which I call is this ubiquitous loop. They're always there. Sometimes you're in the middle of an interloop discussion and you want to send an email, or that you want to have an offline conversation where you're not sure about a solution. You don't want to surface it in a public place, so you send somebody a link to a file that's on your personal OneDrive or your OneDrive for Business, and they say, hey, this is something that this will definitely work. Let's share it with the rest of the team, and you move it over. And so you have kind of the pipes underneath the system. And of course, below all of these things, you have groups, which is helping unify these different artifacts across these different workloads. Think of a group as a security group, so that I know that eventually, because everything will eventually write to the Microsoft Graph, and that security can be applied across all of Office 365 and these assets. Eventually, or right now, if you go and audit your system, you should be able to go in and perform a search and pull back conversations that have happened in Teams, in Yammer, in Skype for Business, in Outlook, things that are local, things that are out in the cloud, things that are on servers that are sitting under the desk of somebody in IT. You should be able to get back all of those artifacts that are relevant because they're tied together by that common group, that common denominator between these different things. And I think we're going to see more and more powerful capabilities that are possible because of the groups in Graph. And then because they are joined together, you can have disparate tools and technologies within the Office 365 ecosystem, but that are tied together by groups and Graph. And therefore, you can then apply security standards and rules and protocols across those things. It's just a great package story. There's a lot of work still to be done there, but that is the direction Microsoft is going. And I always like to use the phrase, Microsoft, you're directionally correct on these things. I'm excited to see more progress. How does that translate into the Microsoft solutions themselves? Well, it depends. And often when people then talk about use cases, they jump to technologies. Again, even this view of the world saying, hey, let's go identify our use cases that are mail and calendar related or that are voice and meeting related. Like, no, you're still looking at it through the lens of features. And we do need to look at use cases that drive the technology, not technology driving the use cases. And there's great tech that's out there. In the SharePoint world, the communication sites, it's just brilliant to understand that how most people are consuming and participating with information inside of SharePoint. It's not about a team site and uploading content, interacting with a list. They actually want the presentation layer. They want to see it. They want to consume and interact with that. So they want to go in and become informed rather than look at it as just another file share, a very expensive, complex file share. It's not what SharePoint is. It's beyond the file share. So communication sites was a huge advance. Of course, we know team sites. But then we also have the hub sites. And I mentioned this before. The ability to go in and say, here are these 4 team sites, these 2 communication sites. They're part of my organization. I then create a branded hub site and roll all of these things in underneath that hub site, and it automatically shares branding, the look and feel, navigation. I can create communications across them, some of it curated, some of it automated. So incredibly powerful. Absolutely love this. When this announcement came out, like it just I wanted this a decade ago. It's so easy to say that, I know. But again, I spent so much time of my SharePoint admin life trying to do this manually, and it sucked. I left Microsoft in 2009, went to a SharePoint migration vendor in Seattle, And part of it, I identified, I understood the value prop for this company because I lived through that experience. But other solutions that are out there, of course, more and more powerful. I love the new Outlook app. If you're not using that on your mobile device, man, it is huge win for Microsoft. Incredibly fast and powerful and search based and it's just getting better and better and better. Teams, of course, it's out there. I'm using the Teams app a ton for the conversations that I'm working with. And for the people that are concerned, and look, the first thing when Teams launched, I automatically asked about migration, administration, all the back-end capabilities. And I was concerned. I said, there's a lot of front-end things, but something I learned back in the early 90s, towards the beginning of my career as a young project manager, and it's turned out to be true throughout almost 30 years of working in tech, is that the easier you make it on the front end for end users, usually the more complex the back end. If you make it easier on the back end, then it means that the front end is usually not as end user friendly. But anyway, so thinking about that, answer those questions. Behind the scenes, what makes the underlying technology, the infrastructure of Teams, is SharePoint and Exchange. Those two workloads. So you think about every file that you upload, it's going into SharePoint. Every conversation that you have, every meeting that you hold, it's being captured as part of the chat service and managed through Exchange. So can I go in and audit? Can I do e-discovery? Can I do a legal hold? Yes. Those capabilities are robust. They're there. You know what they are. You're already using them for Exchange and SharePoint. It's the exact same thing for Teams, just more of it. Now, I'm not addressing Office 365 groups and their management and some of that. That's a conversation for a different day. But Yammer is another powerful tool. A lot of people said, Yammer will go away. And it's like, no, it has very strong use cases and it continues to grow and be more integrated into the overall solution. I think big pet peeve of mine was always that, okay, if I have very secure content in SharePoint, I've got my layers of permissions and all those things, and that one person goes and uploads a secure document and essentially puts a copy of it out in Yammer, I've got no control, I've got no visibility into that asset anymore, and you've got a division, a branch of that document created out there. And by bringing it in so that the back end of Yammer is SharePoint, is a definite move in the right direction to be able to manage all of that so that I can go and create policies and procedures around document management, document life cycles, all in one place. Of course, OneDrive, that's been SharePoint. So how does this look across the various workloads? I mean, sometimes SharePoint is all you need for a project. You don't need to go in and overthink it and add other tools just because you can. SharePoint is what you need, get the project done, get back out. Sometimes, SharePoint working with Teams, so you have the conversational front end, you've got some other third-party apps that you're working with, and so you might want to add through integrations, bots, or just through tabs, working with your SharePoint site. Sometimes there's multiple SharePoint sites and working with Teams, and there's great use cases of how that works, either extending and adding those multiple SharePoint sites, those lists and libraries, to the Files tab within Teams, or adding them as tabs across that project, so that anybody that is a member of that team or a channel within that team can instantly find all of the sites, all of the third-party tools, all of the websites that are relevant to that conversation, to that project that's being worked on. Sometimes it's the teams work with SharePoint sites, and then you've got that outer loop Yammer environment. And there are people that have gone in and, of course, shared links over to Yammer threads and conversations, go and create some Microsoft Flow to automate some of that. I think we're going to see more apps and capabilities that follow the kind of the work out loud pattern that make it easier to whether you're having a conversation in Yammer or over in Teams, or you want to have visibility if you are just going into SharePoint. that you're going to be able to drop web parts in and have integrations between them. So that's happening more and more. Or it's Teams, it's SharePoint and OneDrive, or maybe you have multiple teams, multiple tenants that you're working across, multiple SharePoint sites that you're working with for a large initiative where you're combining things, plus OneDrive, plus Yammer, and because those people get jealous, maybe you're already also doing something in Azure. The point here is that you have tools out there that can be that can follow and meet the needs that are unique to your organization. So I want to back up a bit and talk about it from that higher level. Here is a book I talk about a lot. You don't need to go, well, I'd say go read it. It's an easy read. If you're into network science and the concepts I'm about to discuss. But here's the Cliff Notes version of this, is that everything that we do when talking about communication and collaboration across Office 365, you know what? I just said that and realized that it's irrelevant that it's Office 365. Your organization, that's what's important. The business is what's important. You need to start out by understanding what is the community that we're trying to reach. The best way that I have to just describe this is that you have your company of 10,000 people. You have a business unit within that company. Let's say that it's the product one, and there's 1,000 people within that business unit. Then you have your team of 10 people. You're the manager, your 9 direct reports. Let's round it up. Your 10 direct reports. So you've got the organization at 10,000, the business unit at 1,000, and your team at 10. Okay, I guess manager and 9 direct reports. All right. Anyway, so if you think about that, different communities, different goals, different needs. Can you go to the 10,000 and say, everyone, we will use SharePoint for this? And the business unit at the team level, at all levels, SharePoint is the only solution that we will use. That doesn't work. Many, many, many companies tried that strategy and it failed. And then they blamed SharePoint, and maybe there were some overeager admins, some overeager Microsoft salespeople of what SharePoint should have been, could have been. Anyway, the reality is that the needs of those communities are very different. The second is understanding the social. This isn't social networking the way we're not talking about Facebook and Twitter. This is, how do people socialize? How do they communicate and collaborate? How do they work together? So again, those 3 communities, they're very different ways in which they interact. And then finally, they said understanding the purpose. So think about this. What you're trying to accomplish for 10,000 people, broad communication shared across that, more of the ideation. It's more of a push from the top down of here's the direction, here's the goals for the year, here's our broader wins, sharing that information. How that's done and the purpose of communication at that level is different than at the 1,000 level where, it's product one. And so it's more of a sense of a tighter community around, we have more specific goals and tasks within that. Now, there might be 20 different teams within that business unit, and you own one team or even a sub-team within that. So for that business unit to come out and say, we will do everything through Yammer, may not fit what your team of 10 needs to accomplish. So understanding the scope of the community that you're trying to work with, and that there are different sizes and scopes, that the ways in which those communities interact and the purpose, the goals of each of those communities are different. You'll see very quickly that one technology platform, one way of doing things will never work. I always love the Venn diagram around this: community, social, and purpose. What does that mean? The community is the who, the social is the how, and the purpose is the why. You need to answer those questions. Now, look, from a technology standpoint, there's some great tools that are out there. Matt Wade, it has this awesome periodic table. There's actually an app for this where you can keep up to date. He keeps adding features to this. If you've not seen it and played with it, I highly recommend that you go take a look and become familiar with this, because it's pretty robust, where he illustrates here how they work together, kind of the common overlays there, the inner, the outer loop, and so to understand where the different technologies fall in place. Because if you've done that previous work, if you've gone in there and defined the who, the how, and the why of those, then you're ready to go and start looking at, okay, what are the right tools for each of those? And so things like this. I mean, AvePoint has a great breakdown. I really liked this. Again, it was that answer to that question of which tool to use when, where they went down, and I love this, the speed, the audience, the tone of communication of each one of these. This is just to help you to understand the differences between the different capabilities, where there is overlap. Hopefully it's clearing up of where that overlap exists, but where the strengths of the various solutions are and how they should be best applied to your use cases, to your communities based on your culture. Another one that's out there, the Cloud Transformation Services have that. Again, just more data that you can go look at. And then I'd also highly recommend this book out there, Mastering Microsoft Teams by Melissa and Matthew. That is an excellent desktop resource for all things Teams. I know things are moving pretty quick, but it's always good to start with that baseline and have a comprehensive view into how the Teams works, because I think so many questions, probably all of you that are watching this are experimenting, if not using Teams in production now, and trying to figure out where it fits into what you thought was stable environment with SharePoint and Outlook and kind of the other pieces. So at the end of this, what are the secrets to change? Because change is incredibly hard. Like, is it about selecting the right tools? No. Is it about just training your end users, the right features and the new processes? No. Is it just a lot of prayer around it? Hey, I'm not going to knock that. It helps, but no. Permanent change, making an impact in your organization. It's about altering user behaviors. You can't alter behaviors if you don't understand what those behaviors are, the good and the bad, because you don't want to go and attack, impose upon healthy, positive behaviors when what you're trying to do is optimize, improve, or replace outmoded and incorrect behaviors. So the secret to change, when end users can adapt, they become efficient, effective, more collaborative, more innovative. And it's just a truism out there. When more people participate in the conversation, when more people are collaborating in the system, you're going to get more benefits out of that. The organization will have more innovation. You've got that 10,000 people in your organization, and yet only 500 are actively collaborating, sharing their experiences and knowledge. It might be very effective. You might see monetary value out of maintaining that system based on the innovation that's being generated from your system. How much more innovation will you get if 5,000 of the 10,000 instead of 500? Is it a 10x of what you're seeing today? It could be. You don't know. It's like whenever you hear about the stories of people saying, it's like, well, they're cutting down all the trees in the Amazon, and there could be cures to diseases and things that we don't even know. And you always hear people, it's like how do we know? We don't know what's there to know if there's any answers. We're just cutting down trees. It's like, right, you don't know what innovation is. Like, you've lost the opportunity to find that innovation. And so how do you measure, how do you quantify lost opportunity? And that's what happens when you dictate technology versus understand and adapt to culture. And so without impacting that lasting change, without impacting that culture, you're going to fail. People follow the path of least resistance. How you get there, it's not just about saying this is the right way to do it and you will use this new platform. How you do it is just as important as finishing that. And we often forget people there. So collaboration, so there's the technology, processes, and people. And I've talked about technology. We always start with that. It's the least important. Process is important. More important than technology is process, but people are number one. Now, the 4 ingredients to lasting change, I'll talk about this, tell a quick story and then wrap it up. But transparency, consistency, collaboration, iteration. I'll come back to this. So this is a personal experience, very quick, but about impacting change. So I call it the morning stand-up meeting. So I had a team that was on a very difficult time where I was a shared services team and had to impact very large, almost 2,000 person organization. We owned all the SharePoint environments. I had engineers and PMs and analysts, data analysts on my team, and my folks were strapped. They were running around between various internal customers, some external customers as well, and just frustrated that they would get some other managers and directors with very strong personalities that they were their internal clients that were making their daily lives frustrating and difficult, because they would, no matter what the priorities that I set for my team based on what I understood at that higher level, these individuals were trying to use the phrase manhandle my team members and get them to reprioritize their work. So what I did, we went and built out a very complex SharePoint dashboard, and in this environment where all of our status reports all in one place. So anyone could log in to this site and instantly get a report updated at least weekly, but most things were updated daily. We weren't quite to the point with dynamic yet for a lot of our data points, and our systems weren't that integrated. But we were manually updating all of these status reports and providing that view all the way up to my VP, so that the VP could understand what was going on from that one front page. Anyway, so we were having a difficult time. People were demanding, well, I need to know what's happening with this. Like, well, here's the link. Go look at it. I don't have time to go look at a link. Send it to me via email. That kind of conversation. So I had an idea. I talked with a couple of my team members. I had a team of about 10 to 12 people at the time. And I went and requisitioned a whiteboard, a pen board. And I posted it in the hallway outside of the bank of cubicles where my team sat. And it was a heavy traffic area in between the elevators and the rest of our immediate organization of a couple hundred people. And a lot of our partners came through as well and stuff. So it was a main thoroughfare. And what we did is we did a very kind of daily scrum, and I instituted a all hands standing meeting at 9 a.m. 5 days a week. I had a number of people that had long time work from home arrangements, and I said, we're putting a hold on all of that. It's required. You must be there. Can I dial it in? Nope. Physically be there. So couple people were pretty upset by this. But I said, you know what? You're going to understand. I know it's painful. It's not forever, but we have to do it. And so what we did is we put a list up, and we said all of the projects that we have that are out, that are being worked or not being worked, put them in order of priority, and then who was working on them with our estimated time for completion. And so we did this and put them in order, had who was assigned to each of them. And then on the right, throughout the day, as other requests came in, I said, my employees are not authorized to accept any new projects, period. If they come and ask, I don't care if it takes you 20 minutes to accomplish. Come over, talk to me, and we'll discuss it. But otherwise, your answer is, I'll talk to Christian and point your angry internal customers over to me. Week one, I had regular angry conversations with people across the board. But what happened is that it freed up my people to be able to focus on what they knew the priorities were, to have a process in place that they could kind of rebuff these other individuals that were coming to them trying to reprioritize, that didn't have the perspective of the entire organization or knowledge of our limited size and resources and our other requests. But I had a number of conversations. Like there was one director who is very strong personality, and day one came over very angry, pounded his fist on my desk a bunch of times. We walked over to the pen board on day one. I said, all right, your project is slated as number 5. There's no one working on it right now. I said, I have a team of 10 people. This is how we're spread across these other projects. Here's project number 1, kicked off by our VP. Is your project a higher priority than that project? Well, no. Project number 2, also kicked off, asked for specifically by our VP. Is your project more important than that one? No. Anyway, we agreed, walking through this, that his project was in the right position at number 5. Crazy. And then I said, look, common project management dilemma here. Can you give me more time? No, I need it. Do you have more money you can give me? No. Do you have other resources? I might have 1 or 2 people that I could lend you. It's like, all right, well then I'll manage it. We'll get it done in that time frame. And so that worked in that scenario. Others, where I came back, I said, I'm sorry, if you want to go, I'm happy to go sit with the owners of these other 4 projects and discuss yours and where it fits. And he didn't want to have those conversations. And so it was incredible because it freed up my people to go and focus on their work. It had a process in place that people knew where they stood. What was beautiful about this is that a couple of weeks into it, people started coming over, talking to my team, but they were writing, our internal customers, they were writing on the list on the right side, adding items that would be discussed the next morning. Well, we only did the stand-up meeting for a couple months. Then things kind of went back to normal. But it was a slam dunk. It worked. Why did it work? Why did this model work? It's because we made all of our activities. This is the change management aspect of making collaboration work within your organization. We made sure that our activities were transparent. We were very clear about our priorities, what our limitations were. We kept going against the odds, against the angry voices of change, because nobody likes change. But everyone had a voice. Anyone could write on the board. People tried to go, some external folks, in fact, that problem director tried to go and erase and rearrange the priorities. But we took a snapshot. We corrected it. We knew what was going on, and that would happen occasionally. Like we wouldn't see that happening. It's pretty incredible. But we constantly, daily, even throughout the day, and then we'd announce that there was a revision of priorities. A couple times it happened. We went and talked to the people in the top 4 projects that were being worked on, and they said, you know what? I can ease off in the time frame and allow this other one up. And then we switch places. But all of this, and I should, just to wrap up that story, it's funny, as my manager came to me after about a month of this and said, like, high praise, like, this is awesome. You guys have kicked butt. But what would make this really perfect is if you somehow transplanted what you're doing on the whiteboard over to SharePoint. I just kind of smiled, and later that day sent the link and said, like, great advice. We've moved everything over. We did nothing new. It was already there. So we just shared the link again. But we had changed behavior, built trust in the process, and were able to then get people to start using what we had already had out there in SharePoint, in the cloud, and more readily accessible. And so we were able to move our standing meeting to a virtual standing meeting so that people could get back to their regular schedules. But we adapted to the culture, and I knew that it's not going to work, this scenario. I've tried using it since then. Same model, didn't work because the culture of the organization was different. Success hinges on culture. Same graphic, highlighted that keystone, that capstone there. There's a guess it's the keystone there in the art. But creating a culture with change at its center is the key. So you're going to find other opportunities, unknown opportunities, and you're going to become this digital workplace champion. I love that concept of that digital workplace champion, and supporting those champions within your organization, identifying them, supporting them as they're trying to make change happen. And one way to do that is to experiment. And there's a bunch of tools, resources. I'm going to blow through these pretty quick here. Some old content. This actually came from, Dux Raymond Sy over at the CMO at AvePoint did this, worked on this. I think this is 2014, even 2013, older Microsoft content. But again, it starts with understanding the business, the vision, the goals there, prioritize various solutions. It all comes back to pilot. Pilot, pilot, pilot. Define the scenarios, create a pilot. I remember talking to somebody and I said, well, we ran a pilot. It's like, well, what did you fold into your second pilot? And his response is, a second pilot? Well, yeah, you learned from it. It didn't turn out the way that you wanted. You then change things around and pilot it again, right? No. Yeah, pilot, pilot, pilot. The Microsoft provides a bunch of tools and guidance. I love this around this visioning exercise. You may not care for that wording. It's pretty standard fare in the marketing world. But again, this idea of going in, there's a discussion. It's a collaboration. It's a quorum of leaders coming together to talk about saying, look, we're not going to dictate how. Let's talk about this. And what are we missing? And tapping into that collective unconscious. Now, around teams specifically, again, focus a bunch about teams. There's a lot of great content that's out there. You're seeing this more and more for other workloads. But I talk a lot about teams, but there's all of these use cases and examples. Microsoft is really ramping up their customer evidence. They have been the last couple of years. They've always done it, but it's gotten so much better. But for teams, you can go in and look at this stuff. Success with teams, there's a ton of this content that's out there. But I'm going to wrap up with this last slide around change management guidance. So it really is, how do I get started? What do I go and do? Identify the key stakeholders, your champions, the user profiles, to really understand that culture. Start there. Second, identify the business scenarios that you want to address. And this is guidance for piloting. Don't go take some small out of the way process or team or project out there. Pilot around something that is business critical. You're never going to fully understand and stress test something if you don't take it seriously enough to apply it against real business. You're not going to be able to show the value. No one's going to be won over to say, hey, this can work. This is the right way to do it if it's not important. So be selective about those business scenarios that you focus on for those pilots. But pilot, 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 get everybody in there. I always say that don't go and do this pilot. Don't have conversations around this. Again, this goes back to the transparency, but you can't design all of this in a vacuum. You can't collect requirements, then in a back room, come up with a solution, deploy it, and then come back out and then look shocked when what you've built based on the requirements that you collected, then didn't discuss and refine, and then what you built doesn't meet the needs of the organization. It needs to be done out in the open. Have a formal adoption campaign. You're constantly going to be learning from that, but that should be part of internal awareness, self-help and training information, a feedback mechanism, so important. And it needs to be, not the age-old employee feedback box in the lunchroom, and annually it may or may not be read from. No, it needs to be interactive, real-time. People need to see progress on the questions that they raise and the issues that they surface. Have your predefined success measures, such as, more than 80% of employees are using this platform at least once a week. Number of views on key materials, the level of engagement around those, the number of times a process, a flow is used, showing that people are engaged in using these new tools and services that you've built out, that attendance is there, that participation is high. I love this idea of building a champion program. Recognize the people that embrace it, that run at it. The more that you can support these individuals, the easier your job gets. To go in, and if you have to make hard decisions on, can't add this new tool, or we don't have this new feature, there's a reason why we have turned off self-provisioning. Here's the reasons why. And it's discussed openly. The notes are out there, but it's part of your, let's say, your every other week change management or governance body. And you've got these champions that are end users that are just really active, proactive inside the organization, that are sitting in the room, that are participating as part of that governance body. They then take this information back. When you say, hey, we made a decision as an organization, we're not going to go do this, and people like uproar, why? We need this, it's critical. And these champions will be the first to say, look, I get it. I agree with you. I want it. I'm disappointed, but here's why. Where they won't listen to you as a manager or the IT person. They're going to listen to their peer who definitely understands their business pains, but is best going to be able to articulate the reasons why you made certain decisions as a business. So there is huge value in recognizing, identifying, recognizing, rewarding, and supporting champions and within your organization. And then have that standard feedback method and make it very public, very transparent. Always measure the successes, share the successes, no matter how small the win. And then adjust your messaging, adjust your methods. Recognize transparently when, you know what, we tried this, it didn't work. We're going back to this old way, and whatever the decisions are. You will benefit from being transparent. People will see through it if you're not. It's all about authenticity, and talking about effective communication and collaboration, regardless of the technology. If you're authentic, if people trust the tone, the message, and your voice, then you're going to be more effective. Again, I go point back to what I started out with, that you can have ancient technology, but where people understand each other and work well together, and you have high collaboration and communication among people, then regardless of the technology, that you'll find success. So you need to focus there. With that, I hope that I have shared some information that is useful in your own planning as you're looking at a variety of these technologies and figuring out how to best implement to get high adoption and engagement within your own organization. Trying to adapt all these things to your corporate culture, to what you understand, and what you're hearing from your end users about is always the right approach for these things. I'd love to talk to you more about any specifics in your organization, anything that I can help with. Reach out to me at cbuck@collabtalk.com. You can find me online at buckleyplanet.com, as well as on Twitter and LinkedIn and kind of everywhere else is Buckley Planet, or just look for my name. But thanks a lot for your time, and have a great rest of your week.